I'll begin. Thank you, Linnea. First off, yay, we made it through a summer. And what a summer it was. Now, those of you who are local to Tucson know last summer just sucked in every way imaginable. It was like the second driest in history. This was the second wettest in history. So it felt like redemption, as if, sorry, really felt bad about 2020. Try to make it up to you, give you some extra rain. We'll take it. So we are back from our summer break, kicking off today with a really fascinating topic, one which I will begin by saying I know so little about. So I'm actually most of all looking forward to it. It's really Brian Ask Anything today, but we will let audience questions in as well. Also, this is a regular series we do once a month. I try to find different folks who can represent different perspectives, experiences, and so on. Next month's AMA with me will be John Lai. John is the CEO of Mr. Car Wash. They recently had an IPO. So they are presently one of Tucson's largest publicly traded company stories. They have a market cap of $5.25 billion, and I think are quite fascinating. People often discount the notion of, well, you just take your car, they clean it and you drive away, and not understanding all of the underpinning technology that goes into it, and really all of the sustainability and other aspects behind the business. So looking forward to that chat with John. I also would love to acknowledge Southern Arizona Leadership Council, Pima Community College, and our many U of A partners. Many of you are on this call today or watching it at your leisure elsewhere, but we do appreciate all of you for being here. What's Forge? Why do I have that logo over my shoulder? Forge is the University of Arizona's entrepreneurial mindset unit. So finding opportunities and resources to grow entrepreneurs is what Forge stands for. And we really see finding those opportunities to support entrepreneurs perfect for today's topic. Those opportunities and resources in government, which, in my weird, funny career, that's the one entity I've never worked for, other than, I guess, I do technically work for the state of Arizona, so it's about as close as I've ever gotten. But I really would love to learn more about working with the government. And to help us, special guest is Bill Waynick. Bill is one of Forge's executives in residence. And so, Bill, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off, give us a maybe 2-minute bio of yourself. And then here's your question. And I got to put on my reading glasses. So given your military background, what drew you to Tucson and Forge? And how do you envision bringing that experience to bear here?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brian, for putting this on. I assure you there are plenty of government people looking for entrepreneurs to enter the government space. So Bill Waynick just retired from the Air Force after 30 years. Retired as a colonel, and my career spanned the realm of computer programming, communications, signal, cyber, and information technology, working a lot with special operations forces, as well as a lot of deployments under my belt. But one of the things that drew me back here to Tucson is my wife is from Tubac. So we wanted to get back home to be around family and friends. But one of the things that I really didn't take advantage of is when I was an undergraduate. I graduated in 1991 from the MIS with an MIS degree, or I guess it's bachelor's of business administration. I'm not sure, but it was MIS. And I didn't fully appreciate what I had there at the Eller School. I wish I would have taken more advantage of all the opportunities that were out there, including the entrepreneur programs and whatnot. So, I wanted to give back a little bit. And that's one of the reasons when I came back to Tucson that I did beg Brian to hire me as an executive in residence, and I appreciate him accepting it. But I wanted to be able to give back because 30 years ago, if I would have learned some of these the principles then within the schoolhouse, that it would have helped me a lot more in the Air Force, where I eventually became an intrapreneur and did a lot of cool things, but it would have been accelerated if I had learned what I'm learning now from Brian and from what I had at the Eller School. So I'm here to help connect the entrepreneurs within the Southern Arizona community to the government as much as I can and help out and look for veterans. There are potential military people that are going to retire soon or transition out of the military to maybe potentially do a skill bridge program at the U of A or with the Forge and with some of the entrepreneurs that work with the Forge. And so I'm actively seeking out transitioning veterans that want to work with entrepreneurs with the Forge. So happy to be here, and thanks, Brian.
Thank you so much, Bill, and welcome. Next, I'd like to, there I go. I'd like to put my question to Rachel and John. And could you, number one, say hi, introduce yourselves. And then my question for you is, why did you choose to pitch to government over industry? Because I will say, I don't know who would want to work with the government. It just seems like this giant bureaucracy with no names or faces. Why would you ever choose that over a really straightforward industry set of contacts?
Sure, Rachel, you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to. So hi, I'm Rachel Kahn. It's really awesome to be here. Really excited to connect with this group and learn more about everyone on the panel too. So just to tell you a little bit about me, I'm a really big innovation nerd, if you will. So I started off in research and innovation methodology and process and looking at can you connect right teams and right people to drive the best outcomes and insights. Short answer is yes, you can, and there's a lot you can do around it. And I was really excited about the potential of innovation and graduating college and seeing what I could do in industry, and couldn't believe how hard it was to find people who would say yes to new ideas, and found that politics and silos and all these problems made corporations really, really difficult to drive good ideas with. Sorry, I hate to be like a little too forward with anyone who's looking forward to going to industry, but there's a lot of places are great, but it's hard to find those ones that are really good at that. So really frustrated with that space. I actually started to watch a lot of Shark Tank and saw that on Shark Tank, they say yes to a lot of things. And I couldn't believe how many things I heard yes to on Shark Tank that I felt like, well, how come people say no to my ideas at work? And these people get this. And so, anyways, watched a lot of Shark Tank and had a crazy idea to cold email Mark Cuban and say, hey, what if you had a product and innovation person helping you? He actually took me up on it. And so for a couple of years, I ran his, essentially was his head of product for his portfolio, helped a lot of his groups. And we started to develop a methodology to make it so that people with ideas could actually, or innovators, his entrepreneur portfolio could build faster. And we came up with the whole entire process of how we could help them faster, how he could have clearer top cover of what's going on and bringing him in at the right places, and developed a whole model around it. And so he was like, this is really awesome, but you should take it to corporate innovation. And because startups don't have money, venture capitalists won't really spend money on this, take it to corporates. So actually, I took this model to large corporations with the full intention of launching in the corporate world, and started to really take this from consulting to software. And this crazy, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this crazy COVID thing that's happened, but essentially my whole entire plan of going to corporates really shifted, because the first place that large corporations didn't want to spend January 2020, when I really tried to launch this whole entire thing, very quickly became innovation. And so actually I was brand new to government too, and was incredibly pleasantly surprised at this whole experience, like the lemons out of lemonade experience that I've had of large corporates really weren't looking for innovation. I mean, they needed it so badly, but we weren't ready enough to take on a COVID battle. It was just we were very, very new. And I just happened to see some of these Air Force events around innovation, and they were looking for startups and looking for groups to connect with. And going into those events, everything felt really ambiguous. But the cool thing was you meet some champions in the Air Force, meet people like Bill that are really passionate about change and making progress. And I have to say, knowing the right people really propelled us from having nothing, never working in the government, to now working across the top people in the Air Force, working across incredible groups like Bills at CyberWorks, and really bringing some change together. And not just working on the level that I would have with a corporate would have been, hey, let's do this tiny little project together and see what happens. The government has a lot of money. So we've been able to essentially skip our pre-seed funding and essentially our seed funding by being government backed. And so that's been really exciting for us. And it's taken me from being a corporate person, if you will, really excited about government and fixing the challenges and essentially empowering our startup to be funded through the government.
So your story is like way better than mine. So a little background on myself. Out of college, did 8 years in the Navy. Didn't really do anything, that translated to industry. It was mostly, counter-terror, some language stuff. Moved into cyber when I got out. Bounced around industry, worked at a couple big firms, moved into the startup community. And yeah, had you asked me pre-2017 if I would have ever done business with the government again, totally not, right? I'd done some freelancing, some like cyber op force stuff out of, Army cyber. And I was just like, this is awful. This is awful as I remember it. My dad was a lifelong Govy. And I was like, yep, no, this is the worst. So I actually moved out here to Boulder. I try to keep my ear to the ground for some of the newer things, like, the Deaf Network was coming on the scene about that time, and also about that time, it was AFWorks, right? So the new kind of slick process for Air Force SIBRs and all this funding. So all this buzz was happening, and a friend of mine who was a retired colonel out of the Pentagon, she was like, "You need to go down and volunteer at the academy and just help them out. Just they just need people to like link up." And so through this really weird mesh of like beers and coffee and just a bunch of conversations, I thought there really might be some sort of legs to this whole government funding type thing. And so I was working with a small software company here in Boulder who wanted nothing to do again with government funding, right? Too much red tape, just not worth the lift. And I was like, I think there might be like some good momentum though going for this other like non-traditional, like non-dilutive seed funding. And they're like, no, we don't want to do it. So finally, I convinced them to let me spin off into my own company. And that's what I'm still doing now. And then I kind of tailored their solution to the DoD. So I essentially function as their DoD kind of arm, right? Business development and services and stuff like that. Stuff they still don't want to do, but it's been awesome for us. So now we kind of branched out into more just a holistic R&D shop. And yeah, 4 years later, right? It's still going strong. So yeah, I don't know how to convince people that doing business with the government isn't as painful as it was, especially as things change. So I think if you take a snapshot at any given point in time, it looks painful. But if you look at it for the life cycle, all the opportunities out there for these startups to get non-dilutive seed funding at that scale is unreal. Not something I thought I would have been able to take advantage of. But yeah, so far it's been great. And I totally try to convince people to throw their hats in the ring. There's some talks I have out there from different conferences where I thought DoD didn't have a lot of presence, a lot of like, I think we did DEF CON, did B-Sides Vegas a couple of years ago with some mixed reception of telling people to go work for the government. But yeah, I think there's a lot of cool energy kind of in the space right now.
Thanks, John. There's a word you used, which I think is a really key word. I think, Greg, you'll be the perfect person to respond, which is non-dilutive. We spend a lot of times working with founders who work very hard to build their business. And then this idea that, quote, they're giving up a piece of it can make a lot of them hesitant. And I think what people may not appreciate or realize is the non-dilutive aspect of these funds. So, Greg, would you mind both introducing yourself and then, hey, why should a startup work with government? And if non-dilutive fits into that answer, all the better.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and I knew exactly what you were talking about when you started saying one of the best parts. So Greg Bennett. I'm actually with Air Force CyberWorks, so the organization that Bill Waynick formerly ran, and he is now volunteering his time and talent to help you out, which is absolutely awesome. So I want to give you kind of a quick wave top. For me, 22 years in the Air Force. I spent time with a nonprofit called the Partnership Intermediary. I ran a business for almost 14 years. Spent time as a reservist the last part of my career. So it's kind of a unique look. And I actually worked in an interagency center with DHS and DoD. So twice the fun, twice the pain, if you will, from a government perspective. And I'm still trying to pull the spear out from John's poke on why doing business with the government. So one, I'll kind of lead with, I was going to go with something noble in terms of what you can do for airmen and soldiers out there. But I do think it's a noble calling. It's still why I'm doing what I'm doing. But equally important, I think, Brian kind of alluded to it. There is non-dilutive capital that the government is handing out. And I want to frame that for you because I think it's really important. So if you look at the amount of money that AFWorks awards on behalf of the Air Force and some for some of the other services, it is in the magnitude of 800 billion a year. 800 million, I'm sorry. So $800 million a year of non-dilutive capital that goes out the door every single year for small businesses, non-traditional businesses that are working with the government. And I think the one thing I really want to impart to this group is that the Air Force and the DoD really need you, is kind of the bottom line up front. There are a number of technology areas where for a very long time the government was the technology leader in those areas, and we have experienced a role reversal. So there are a number of technology areas where, quite frankly, we are very far behind. And at the end of the day, we need your help to help us catch up. That's kind of the bottom line up front. So I've had kind of a unique opportunity to dabble in a number of different spaces on the SIBR and SITR side. So the one thing I did want to mention, in addition to SBIR, is the STTR program, because you can actually tap the resources of the University of Arizona. If there's an interesting technology that you find and you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you could actually license a technology from U of A, get non-dilutive capital to kind of push that out. And so I want to give you kind of a quick, and I don't want to steal Brent's thunder here. He'll go into a little bit more detail, I think, but anywhere from $50K to approximately $1.5 million is kind of the range for SBIRs. The government is very protective of your IP, so don't feel like there will be an IP grab. And once you win either a phase 1 or a phase 2 award, you are eligible at that point for a direct award through a phase 3 from the government. So it gives you direct access to follow-on contracts, sole source, and thank you for pointing that out. The other thing I wanted to mention really quickly is commercial solutions offerings. So that's another vehicle that the government has to move more at a B2B speed to award contracts. Rachel actually was the benefactor of our very first CSO from CyberWorks. So congratulations, Rachel. And she has parlayed that into lots of other things. And quite frankly, she's helping the Air Force in a very big way try to understand how to create repeatable pathways to actually, for entrepreneurs to actually create innovation and get it into the hands of the user community. So sorry, that was probably a little bit more than 3 to 5, but just kind of a quick overview, and I will turn it back to Brent.
Yeah, that was great, Greg. Thank you. And before I ask Brent to introduce himself, I will also mention, because we are Forge is part of RII, Research, Innovation, and Impact. Within RII, we also have Tech Launch Arizona, which is essentially the tech transfer commercialization arm for the university. And they do a lot of work on the STTR, SBIR front. as also does UACI, the University of Arizona Center for Innovation, which is part of Tech Parks Arizona, also in RII. And they are, I like to say, our resident experts in SBIR, STTR. We often send folks to them initially to get more information and learn more. So with that plug, let's go to somebody whose company, whose organization actually has SBIR in it. Brent Nichols, could you introduce yourself, please? And then what is the formula for a winning pitch to SBIR?
Well, thanks, Brian, and thanks for everyone for joining, because I think this is a really cool opportunity. You didn't ask me the question, but I just returned to Tucson after having been away for a while. But Tucson's home, and a big part of connecting with Bill and what I hope to accomplish through the SBIR process is like, why not Arizona businesses? Why not Tucson businesses? Why not? I live in Vail. Why not Vail? And so I'm looking forward to giving as much time as I possibly can to questions that people have, or to assist to take advantage of this opportunity. But yeah, so quickly about me, my name is Brent Nichols. I was a 12-year contracting officer in the military, got out about 3 years ago, still serve as a reservist. So when you say things like, why would anyone do business with the government? Well, I was the person that made you say that. And I would say to myself, why would anyone do business with us? We make it so difficult. And the one thing I'd want to say to people that as they embark on this journey, which I hope they do, is it's not only difficult for you as a business is trying to grab a foothold, but it's difficult for the government. It's difficult for, as a contracting officer, I called my customers other military folks, people that came to me with their requirements, and they're trying to do this dance, trying to figure out what I need in order to execute their requirement. And it's hard, it's difficult, but it's worth it, and I think it was Rachel that mentioned it, but there's a relationship portion here that happens in the SBIR process. I mean, it's been around since the 80s. We haven't really talked about that. This is not new. Innovation, the idea is not new, but it's certainly new to the Air Force, or I should say the military in some ways. And so there's so many things that I'd love to talk about, and maybe there'll be questions there, but always feel free to reach out, but we can't do it here. I'd love to talk about the phases and what that looks like, and maybe there'll be time. But when it comes to having a winning approach, it really is not being afraid, first and foremost, to start making connections on LinkedIn and going to events and starting to talk to military folks. And this is, I would say, I don't know if that advice would have been there 5 years ago, because they weren't as approachable as they are now. I look at an organization like CyberWorks here, like they want to engage. They're out there over. I follow many people from LinkedIn on LinkedIn at CyberWorks is being a good example of, hey, we're here. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. That was not all. And Bill, you were around a little longer than I have been in the Air Force, but we know this hasn't always been the posture, and it's changed. And they want to know. They want to hear from industry, and that's the whole point of the way they're executing SBIR process right now. Is they're saying we want to participate in what's the success that's already happening in the commercial world. We want to participate by using our SBIR dollars to put some life into innovation and be the beneficiaries of it as well. So, I would just say quickly, Brian, one is engage early, get to know some people so you can really understand their problem. Because when it comes to the proposal writing, you're the experts. You already know what you're doing. You just need to be able to say it in a way that is understandable to those folks that are evaluating it. And there's a bunch of different ways that SBIR is presented, but I guess I would start there, Brian. Start having conversations before you even think about proposing. That doesn't mean don't propose. Just that would be my advice from the jump.
Wait a minute. Are you suggesting that an entrepreneur should understand the problem thoroughly before proposing a solution?
Well, so one term that we haven't thrown out yet, but is important is the term dual use, right? And so you have this way that your commercial customers use it, and it might be exactly the same as your defense customers. But this is a really important distinction about, as you look at your product, man, how could this be used? I know I'm using it commercially, I'm seeing success, and I know the Air Force or the Navy or the Army, they could use it, but the way that might be defined, it might be a little bit different. And so what you think It's already there. You just need to unlock it through those conversations and better understanding this unique customer's problem.
So thank you, Brent. That's a really great point. And, something that we talk a lot with entrepreneurs about is surround yourself with really good advisors, because those people may bring a perspective you never saw. Often an entrepreneur goes into the problem with, I have this solution and it's going to fix this specific problem. And they don't know there's someone adjacent or in this other area who could desperately use that same solution. And if you don't have a set of advisors around you who might know about that problem, you're missing a market opportunity. So I want to, one last question, then, we'll take some of the questions from the audience. I want to put this one in that context of kind of knowing your market, knowing who you're delivering to. Back to Rachel and John, I'm curious to know how entrepreneurs often go through the pivot. Right? They start out thinking, this is what I'm going to do. And then as they get further down the path, they understand that, well, maybe this wasn't the right fit, but over here is something that seems attractive. So how far have you pivoted from your original idea? And this is really, to me, how do we encapsulate this for entrepreneurs on the Zoom to understand that, we don't always end up doing the thing that we started with. So could you help enlighten us a little?
I guess I'll dive in first. Sure. Lots and lots of pivoting for sure. I think Eric Ries actually has a really nice model for this, and I'm probably gonna butcher it, but essentially when you know what the problem is, you can have a vision of essentially the outcomes that come out from that or from solving that problem. But really your solution is going to drastically change, because people say one thing, they want something else. It's all adjusted. So I'll tell you, like I said, I started off as a methodology nerd. I was really excited about team dynamics and how do you get the right people and processes and everything all together to drive innovation. And that's a lot of what we worked, a lot of pieces of what we worked actually with Bill on the CSO was around those pieces. But the thing that I've actually found the most traction with, if you don't mind, like what I sell with, is people are excited more about the outcomes and the magic of what all of that looks like in the end. So what did you actually achieve? And should we keep funding it? Should we, where should we keep putting our money? And essentially more of that top-down approach of where should money and all of these different things go. And I was really excited about the bottom up and enabling all the different parts. And so it's really interesting how I would say we've pivoted our product to be more of that top-down capability, but also that tends to be how we sell. And the thing that actually got me excited has become a little bit more of our secret sauce. And so I'd say like what gets me going about Productable versus what ends up being the first thing in our product and versus like what I sell with and get our customers excited about are completely different things. And if I would have guessed it, I would have never gotten it right. And I had to let go a lot to be able to let all that magic come together.
Yeah, so to kind of echo what you're saying, like be super flexible. From where we started in 2018, which was actually with CyberWorks, we're nowhere, if you looked at the two different pitch decks, it doesn't even look like the same thing, right? Maybe the icons are the same. But we started with automation for mission, like actual like operational planning, right? So like planes and people on the ground and cyber and all of this different stuff. And then we pivoted into personal readiness. And then we moved into like very discrete subsections of personal readiness. And then we moved into like personnel form digitization. And then we moved into something that I guess is still readiness, but like in a whole different vein. So we redid the whole piece, which is fine. Because what it enabled us to do, and this is kind of the same on the commercial and the DoD side, is your customer is going to drive any funding that comes after what you're doing at this current moment, right? So they have to be happy and they have to be able to vouch for it to their leadership. So if you don't come with something that they see the value of, then kind of what's the purpose, right? The purpose of all these programs isn't to shoehorn a commercial thing into the DoD, right? It's to bring in a commercial thing that the DoD is missing and tailor it to them. So yeah, I would say stay super flexible, because you never know who's going to see what you're pitching and who's going to want maybe a piece of it or maybe the flavor of it, but in a different form. But yeah, you've got to kind of be willing to pivot, especially if they're talking about coming with money, right? That's usually what happens, is they're like, how much to do the thing that's totally unrelated but might like exist in the same realm. It's like, well, I guess if you're paying me, I'll do it, right? That's kind of like my business, the mantra, right? like we'll work for money. So
Yeah, we also talk a lot with founders, because they're going in front of investors. Investors sometimes see a different animal, and figuring out, well, what are you really good at versus what do you think is going to be highly lucrative. I think what's key is you had the right team to be able to pivot. It's one thing to be flexible. It's another to have the skills and the resources to be able to make that adaptation. I want to jump over to some of the questions we've been getting from the audience, and again, encourage people, if you have other questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. So Shelley, thanks for joining us today from SALC. Shelley wants to know, this is probably I'll say it's a very wide open question. Are there sectors that are better prospects than others for government funding? And I'll leave that to the entire panel to answer based on your history and experience.
I'll jump in real quick, just because I've been heavy into proposals lately and a wider array of customers throughout the DoD. I would simply say, you might find some trends at certain times through SBIR rounds, so there are times throughout the year, it's about 3 times a year, there'll be big splashes of topics. Hey, here's what the Army's looking for. Here's what DARPA's looking for, the NIH or the Air Force. And you might see some trends, and those are certainly things to note. Again, hopefully you've already built a relationship with your potential customers, so you see those, you're way ahead of those trends. Again, I don't want that to be a limiting factor. I just want you to, again, encourage people to get out there and talk. But so there are certain trends, but at the end of the day, and you were talking about having some advisors and having people like Bill or interacting with folks at CyberWorks or any number of the organizations that are out there. They're easily accessible, more so than they ever have been. LinkedIn's a good place to find them. Just having the conversation about what's coming down. So I kind of lost my train of thought. I guess I just more want to say that when you are able to have these interactions, you're able to begin to envision what your product or your service looks like in a defense environment. And so if you can do that, if you can put some clear boundaries about, hey, this is what it would look like. And again, it may be very similar. There are no limitations. If you could target one. In the Air Force, now I'm partial to the Air Force because I love the Air Force, but they do a really great job of trying to just invite everyone. They have something known as the open topic. Open topic says, come on, let us know what you got. And in that first phase, they may not give you much, $50,000, and it's 3 months, but you get 3 months to go find a customer and go explore with somebody and try to envision what that research and development might look like. And so I would love it if all the other DoD branches put that together, all the people that execute SBIR, they don't. But so 1, there are trends, take a look at those, but 2, look at the Air Force and the open topic. But if you can have that defense customer in mind, there's a defense need and you can define it, go for it.
Anyone else? Thank you, Brent.
Greg, I see you unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I kind of piggybacking on the open topic piece, because it really lends itself to dual use technologies. It's, very, very broad topic areas. And if you have a capability that you think would meet a need, and virtually any need that you have in the private sector, you've got some equivalent need or parallel need on the government side. And so it's a great way to just kind of push something across the table and say, is there some interest in this? I will say that nowadays, particularly on the open topic, they are looking for a mature capability that you're already making money on, that demonstrates that you already have a pathway on the commercial side, and that it would have viability if it crossed over to the government side. Over.
I'd say I'm just going to throw one in too. There's some surprising pieces of what could be used by the government because maybe you don't necessarily think of the government as a B2C kind of customer with consumers, but every single base and every single type of for the Air Force, for the Army, for the Navy, they're basically cities. And there's just as much as you have people that are pilots or taking care of ships or anything in any of these groups, you have people that are working at restaurants, you have people that run hospitals. There's all different kinds of businesses that exist within the DoD and within the government. And so I actually think there's a huge, great opportunity to sell into the government because normally you might actually be able to get somebody who wants to buy a large quantity of a consumer thing that might be difficult to get an audience for otherwise. So let's say you really want to sell a workout video that normally you would just go on Facebook and put ads for your awesome workout, just for example. Maybe you could instead sell it to an Air Force entity that has an exercise program and an administration office for it. Now, I don't know if that one exists, but that's just for example. And so there's definitely some unexpected markets, I think. And then also on the enterprise side, if you have an enterprise software, enterprise solution, the government probably has a group that needs something like that too.
Awesome. Thank you. So we have a question from one of our other Forge executives in residence, Pat Hager. Pat wants to hear a little bit more about the treatment of intellectual property. Pat's statement is, previously it's been a stumbling block for entrepreneurs seeking to work with or be funded by the government. Could you comment a little bit more on, how is this being approached and what, I won't say what assurances, but what have you seen where people come in and how their IP's been respected?
I'll jump in real quick, and I'm sure Brent probably has some comments on this one too. But I think one of the things that is inherent in the SBIR program is that your lifeblood hinges on your IP as an entrepreneur. And by and large, what I have seen is the government is very sensitive to that and very protective of those IP rights to make sure that your lifeblood is preserved, if you will. And so even when we get slide decks from folks that say, hey, this is sensitive to our organization, we, at least on our side, I feel like we do a pretty good job of making sure that we either keep a close hold or it stays within the government side of the house to make sure that we don't violate that.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to what Greg said is that government's sensitive to it for two reasons. One, we've messed up in the past, just not really being sensitive to it and not being a good partner in that way. And I don't think it's been malicious, although I'm sure there has been horror stories that I've read some, but that we've messed up and that we got kind of a bad reputation for it. And all of a sudden, we want to share in this investment. The government wants to share in this investment, and we make it hard to be able to do that if people don't want to do business with the government. And so that's one reason. And two, the government's began to insert, people in the military and putting them in businesses at a more frequent way through fellowships and things like that. And this isn't the only way, but really starting to try to do business like Silicon Valley does business, like industry does business. And to your point, Greg, like this is the lifeblood of an organization. If we're not respecting that, we're not understanding that. So, there are things that we could point to and say, hey, this is all kind of generic what we're talking about right now. But if you look at solicitations and things, you can begin to identify, oh, that's where they're protecting it. Oh, that's where they're protecting it. And I'm happy to talk more about that, but they put a lot more things in place to make it easier and for founders to feel safer.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in here and ask a question because I'm actually going through this right now. Brian, one of the things that Brian is, part of his teachings is the team matters, for your organization, for your team, who's doing the pitch and whatnot. And I've seen the importance of that as well. And I know that you all have, formed teams for your startups, for your businesses and whatnot. I'm curious, knowing what you know now, what did you miss at the beginning as far as your team composition? So if you could go back in time and start all over, what kind of expertise or person would you bring on board your team to start up and start doing your entrepreneuring for all of you?
I might be able to take a stab at this one, but maybe in a different way than you might actually be meaning. But this is probably the biggest piece of advice I could give to anyone doing, especially SIBR work or sitter work. So, on the commercial side, I'd spent a long time working a lot of pro serve, right? So like customer facing engagements, right? That are usually like limited duration. And it always seemed that you kind of lived or died by how involved the customer was. So when we started our SIBR effort, a big thing to me was to make sure that in our case, it was Air Force sponsors were totally bought into the process. I kind of was fortunate enough, right? I had, this is right before Bill actually came on. So I had some good stakeholders from CyberWorks. I had some good stakeholders from the Academy. And it worked out really well because without a bought in customer, like really willing to put the time in, we would have been totally screwed, right? So in so many ways, like I just look back on it. So when we talk about team composition, I think folks doing DoD work really need to do some due diligence on who they're working with on the customer side, because they're as much of your team as someone that works for you. And a lot of times their input will matter a lot more. In fact, we've even now started in these later phases of our project, rather than going and asking people for money to continue the project, we ask for time. We say every week, I want 8 hours of 2 of your people's time to vet what we're doing and to test it. And that has gotten rid of more prospective customers than I thought possible. We've probably lost 9 out of every 10 people that come to the table when they're like, well, we would have given you money, but we don't want to give you any of our time. And that's a great way to gauge interest. So when I put together these longer term teams now, we actually have probably 2 or 3 rock solid customers that have driven the project more than we've driven it internally, but that's because we got rid of the rest. So just my 2 cents there, but something that has served me well over the past couple of years.
That's super interesting. I would echo that and say that navigating the government is challenging, and it's interesting because, I guess there's just to be blunt to say it, they give you enough money to deal with them. So essentially, it's a little bit hard to navigate all these pieces, but if you will, because the check sizes are so much larger, I actually get to have somebody on my team that can focus on navigating the government. And I can't even begin to tell you how amazing that is, because we can create so much more of an impact when we have somebody who's really focused on making sure that that the government is happy, that we're solving the right problems, that we're meeting the right people, and actually that the government cares enough to fund us to have a person that does that. And so it was a little bit hard. Bill, unfortunately, when we were working together, he was stuck with me. But now in the phase of work that we're doing, we're able to have essentially more people work on the relationship management aspect. And so I would say that's it from our end too.
Yeah, we're interesting because we play in all the places, right? Because we're living in SIBR. We interact with a company where you want to be. We'll find a way to get there. Business development as a service is a big part of what we do. But for us, we would love to have one person I would love to have one person from CyberWorks and one person from StealthWorks and one person from the Army Research Lab, and that really knows how those organizations tick. And so that's a utopian world that none of us live in, even folks like us who spend all our time interacting with them every day. So I would just say, having to interact with so many startups and some that are just commercially very successful, and I think it was Greg talking about, look, there's some nobility here. You want to do service to your country, but also there's money here. There's an opportunity here. And so I think that can be a little distracting in some ways for some folks. Hey, just show me the money. It's we'll get there, but you got to care for a minute. You got to care about your customer in a way that you haven't before. And so if you got a team member that just doesn't care about the defense world at all, and Rachel kind of pointed out some things, like there's businesses inside the defense world, you can find the place that you love. I promise you can. It's not just, jets and guns and things like that. So I really highly recommend whoever that is. They call it the principal investigator, that first line of defense for that person working that cyber requirement and trying to propose to the government. They should be at least a little bit excited about that opportunity to interact, because it's going to require some patience. You're going to get ghosted more than once. You're going to get the cold shoulder more than once. There's going to be just things that beyond just chasing a couple dollars you're going to need. So I would just say I highly recommend. You don't have to be a military expert, but be kind of excited about working in this space is what I recommend.
Thank you, Brent. There were two really key things you said. One was your point about that it is not just guns and jets and whatnot. And I confess that this is a topic that comes up a lot. People say, well, why would I want to work with them? I don't believe in this. And I think, Rachel, you made the point that they're cities themselves, the bases. If you want to work with people in the hospitality industry or in the healthcare industry, they're in the military too, So I think exactly to your point, it is a much larger organization. People tend to kind of think of it in one way, and they're really missing the forest for the trees. The other thing you said, which just sort of took me back, I led tech scouting for Sanofi. It was a 130,000 employee company. I cannot imagine being a tech scout for the US government and DoD. No way. That it would take its own army to do all of that. So I think that's, the message there is don't be discouraged as an entrepreneur if you can't seem to find the right fit in one area. Expand your reach, work with folks like everybody that's on this call and others who may say, well, you know what, doesn't maybe fit with what we're doing, say at CyberWorks, but I happen to know about this initiative going on somewhere else, and I can point you to them. And that's really one of the roles that we're looking to build to fill for us at Forge, is be that window person to all of what's going on. But I'm sure Bill will be the first to say he doesn't know all of it. So that's why he needs a network like all of you. One question that I missed before, and I think it actually segues perfectly, is Clayton asked, is there a way that someone who's always innovating and finding improvements in a very broad spectrum to get involved and work with people versus having to have a specific product? Now, my first thought was the open, the open challenge that you described earlier, but are there other thoughts in terms of someone who likes to work, in that broad spectrum versus having a specific product?
Yeah. I guess if no one else wants to jump in, I'll jump in again. So the dual use, what they call the open topic, right, where you take a commercially viable solution and then make it a DoD thing, I would say might be actually the opposite of what I would suggest if you're coming with something but you don't know what that thing is yet. What I call traditional SIBRs, or just non-open calls, might be a better spot to start, where the DoD puts out a thing that they want, and then your phase one is usually like some sort of feasibility study. And it's weird because you always have to talk in the tense of like, this is a thing that exists, and then they just know that it doesn't exist, but then you're able to build it, and then you are also able to take it and turn it into a commercial, right? So it's the opposite business model of the open call. Sometimes those are better. The issue with those, one, it's usually a way more boring process to write those proposals because they're white papers for the most part, which is awful, but okay, it is what it is, right? But the acceptance rate is usually way lower. I'd say, Brent, you probably know better than me, I'd say 2 to 3, maybe per topic, vice, the open calls, which are, hundreds per topic. So your win percentage goes down. And then a lot of them tend to be a little more traditional in the selection criteria, even though these are still small business set-asides, R&D funds. I get, one of the great things about the SIBR and SIBR programs, you get feedback off of everything. The feedback I get off of traditional SIBRs is kind of funny. I had one from the last round that I think the guy just screamed into his monitor and like mash the keyboard because it wasn't actual sentences. And I was like, I don't know if you actually meant to send that, or if it was like an autocomplete field that had to have something in it. And I had one also that was, the pro was you're a small business and the con was you're a small business. So take it for what it's worth, but that might be a route to go through of where you don't have to choose a topic. You just have to be able to build what they want.
That's a great thought, John. And I would just say, we talked earlier about, you talk about win rate. Yes, it is low. Sometimes it's only one. And sometimes that, I hate to say it, the company that was going to win it, they already know who they are. They just need to go through the process. And that sounds silly. And I'm happy to get on a soapbox about it another time. But oftentimes there are 2 or 3, maybe 5, 6 opportunities towards a specific topic. And here's what I'd say is, looking at those SIBR topics, the way the rhythm goes, like I said, it's about 3 times a year. It's not only 3 times a year, but they'll do a pre-solicitation. There'll be a window about a month long where it says, here's the point of contact. Here's the description of it. Here's their information. Contact them 100% of the time and talk to them about what you're doing. Talk to them about your solution and see if you can get some buzzwords from what they're interested in, but also confirm that what you have in mind is something that would fit. So you don't want to be writing white papers with low probabilities of win, but if you can have those conversations, and again, this is a change from the past. It was like contracting officers, like, do not talk to industry. Well, SIBR and SITR was one of the few ways where industry can help develop topics and help develop what they need. And this is the way you can do it. So interact early and often with them. Anytime you get an opportunity to do it, join AMAs and things like in webinars and things of that nature, do it and ask questions, ask really hard questions, put them in a really awkward spot. I think the more you do that, the better.
Hey, Clayton, I'll take that in a different direction for just really, really quickly. There are other organizations out there that are trying to create a bridge between the government and industry. And there's organizations like Tech Connect that are looking for really high speed entrepreneurs that can license technologies that the government's developed. So they clearly have an interest and they have a need. But they're looking for folks to partner in those opportunities through that and ICOR and others, where you actually take government IP, license it, and develop it and bring it back to the government.
Thanks so much, Greg. Just looking at the time, we are coming to the end of the hour, and I want to first of all thank you, Bill, for being here today. The resources and things you put in and helping to pull together this fantastic panel. This has really been a great conversation, and I have been jotting down notes for myself that I need to follow up on. I'd also like to thank you, Greg and Brent and Rachel and John, so much for being here today, spending an hour of your time with us. Yeah, as Bill said, it went by a lot faster. It was not like we had to make up the time. Also give a quick little shout out up there to you, Amanda. Thanks so much for throwing all of your info in. Always appreciate the contributions and ways for people to connect, both from a small business perspective, as well as through groups like Forge and others. So with that, I thank you all. Look forward to our next Forge AMA in October with John Lai, CEO of Mr. Car Wash. And until then, stay hungry, entrepreneurs. Thanks. Bye, everybody.